Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome today to my review of the latest release by Malaysian micro brand Revelo. It's called the Terra and it's their interpretation of a World War II Dirty Dozen field watch. If you're unfamiliar with the brand, Revelo sits in an interesting space, I think, priced north of most of the AliExpress stuff, but south of most micro brands, somewhere between 150 and 350 US dollars. If you're unfamiliar with the Dirty Dozen field watch, these were issued to British servicemen during the final years of World War II and were made by 12 different Swiss watchmakers, hence the moniker. Those watchmakers included Omega, IWC, JLC and Lemania amongst others. As you can see here, they all had key characteristics in common, including large Arabic numerals and a small second indicator at the 6. Oddly enough, the Revelo Terra features large Arabic numerals and a small second indicator at the 6. But in a very 2025 twist, the numerals are cast 3D Lume blocks. These are really cool. I think there's something you're going to see a lot of this year as a consequence. Now, you saw the pop-up, I'm sure. This video is sponsored by Revelo. I will therefore, of course, leave a link to their website in the description of the video. These go on sale tomorrow, well, my tomorrow anyway, Thursday the 6th of February, with delivery taking place next month, March 2025. Now, as is the Revelo tradition, they have launched a bunch of different dial versions, but in really small quantities, some as few as 20 pieces. The site is still in a pre-launch phase with a countdown timer and so on, but there's plenty of basic information still available, including the different colour versions. Now, you will need to check back for final clarification on pricing. I was told that prices will begin at $250 and end at $350 or thereabouts anyway. There are 3 Fume sand dials in stainless steel which are the most reserved, either black, green or blue. There's also a full lume dial option, a lumed forged carbon dial option, and red aventurine, something I have never seen before. And then no less than 5 different dial options with a bronze case rather than stainless steel. The 3 sands are back again, plus forged carbon and a colour version of the sand dial unique to bronze, that being Fume Sand Orange. So 11 different versions altogether, but only 285 watches across all of those different styles. Now, I got sent a pretty representative selection of 3 prototypes, one with a forged carbon dial and a bracelet in steel, one red aventurine dial also in steel on a very nice kind of performance style rubber strap, and the molten sand as they call it, which is the Fume Orange bronze on leather. And check out those lume block Arabics. I first saw these on the Christopher Ward Lumiere last year. I suspect many people did, and I suspect we're going to see a lot of them on quite a lot of different watches over the course of the next 1 or 2 years. They look really cool during the daytime, offering every bit as much contrast, definition and legibility as a printed or even an applied numeral, but the look after dark is something altogether more spectacular. Let's have a look at the lume early today then. The watch on the right happens to be the bronze case using C3 Superluminova. They actually quote as Japanese Superluminova rather than Swiss lume. And it's the same green lume on all 3 hands. The watch on the left is the forged carbon dial, which is infused with C3 but uses BGW9 lume blocks and hands for contrast. Now, if you've ever seen a forged carbon dial after dark before, you'll know what to expect. They look pretty amazing initially, but they do fade quite quickly shortly thereafter. But check out how well both sets of numerals hang on. They even outlast the hands, which is obviously not ideal, but it is a testament to how good these cast blocks are. I will not be complaining if they become a thing this year, put it that way. But let's take a step back and have a look at the dimensions and specifications. Now, obviously, case and dial materials do change these a little bit, but not all that much. The diameter of all of them is 38.2. They are all 11.6mm thick and have a lug to lug of only 44mm. 20mm between the lugs. The bracelets taper from 20 down to 18, then back up to 20 for the clasp. Weight though, this is where it gets a little bit grey. As sized for my average size wrist, the forged carbon on the full bracelet weighs in at 148 grams. That is actually quite heavy, and I'll discuss the reasons for that shortly. For your reference, the aventurine or FKM weighs 84 grams, and the bronze on leather weighs in at 87 grams. The differences there are thanks to the straps rather than the material, because the bronze is a couple of grams heavier than the steel. Clear as mud? Good. I'll carry on. Crystal is top hat sapphire, water resistance is 100 meters with a screw down crown, and the movement in the back is a seagull ST17. Perhaps not what you were expecting, certainly not what I was expecting, but maybe when you think about it, exactly what we both should have been expecting. As discussed, a Dirty Dozen homage needs a small second indicator at the 6 o'clock position. That is non-negotiable. Seiko do not make one of their 4R/NH movements with a small second complication at all. Miyota do make a small second version of the 8000 series, but not with the crown at 3 when the small second is at 6. That left Kevin, Revelo's brand owner, looking for an alternative, an affordable alternative, and he found the Seagull ST17. I'll be honest, in operation it feels no different to either of those other two options. The crown pops are very satisfying and the manual wind is actually pretty smooth. And because these are prototypes, I'm sure nobody will mind me taking the back off one for a look-see. It features some Shanghai stripes on both the rotor and a number of the plates. I believe this one has 20 joules in this particular configuration, a 40-hour power reserve, a 3 Hz beat rate, and a stated accuracy of -30 to +30 seconds per day variance. But it doesn't hack. Now, there is an argument that that makes it more authentic because it's more like an original Dirty Dozen, but that's not an argument that I'm personally prepared to make. The case feels really solid regardless of whether we're talking about the stainless steel or the bronze versions. It's a really thick and heavy case back. By the way, 15 grams of the weight comes from the case back. There is a deliberately pronounced vertical brushing to the side of the case and to both the horizontal and vertical parts of that bezel. There is a little bit of high polish though where the mid case meets the bezel, and of course the bezel chamfer, as you can see. The Terra uses a decent sized onion style crown, perhaps a little more early Flieger than Dirty Dozen, but I will let them off if you will, especially as that crown is loomed with the Revelo logo as a bonus. Bracelet. The bracelet is very nice. 3-link style, and they're small links. It's fully articulated, it doesn't stick or get caught anywhere. All upper surfaces are fully brushed, and there are high polish chamfers on the edges of each link for a little bit of extra light play, but not too much extra light play. It features quick release end links, screws hold it all together, and it uses a push button clasp to allow for just under 1 centimeter of on the fly, if not on the wrist, adjustability. There are a couple of slightly sharp leading edges on the clasp, but other than that, it feels like the bracelet of a $500 microbrand watch and not a $300 microbrand watch. It is, however, heavy, weighing in at nearly 100 grams with all the supplied links. That's where the weight comes from. That's why a 38mm field watch with a plastic movement holder weighs 150 grams. Alright, dial and hands, I will cycle through all 3 of the watches that I was sent here. There are obvious similarities across them, but there are of course a few differences. All 3 dials feature the same basic layout. There's a recessed small second indicator in black with white markings at the 6, and those large applied cast loom block Arabics. 1 to 12 -6, which instead gets a small horizontal rectangle. Now on the forged carbon and the orange fume, the flat dial surface extends all the way out to the edges where the dial meets the case, whereas on the red aventurine, the printed train track style minute track sits recessed at the edge, just like the small second does. The handset is the same on all 3 watches, although the colour does vary. Tapered style sword hands with a flat brushed upper surface and high polished chamfered edges. You've already seen the strips of loom running down their centres in action a little earlier. So the sand dial is definitely the most traditional of the 3, even though it's not particularly traditional. It has a fume gradient which looks fantastic, and it's also textured so it doesn't reflect the light, which is not something you can say about the red aventurine. This is really nice. I'm sure that this watch will not go unnoticed by other micro brand owners. Perhaps we will also see this again several times later in the year. And finally, the forged carbon looks pretty cool. If you haven't seen one before, I suppose it's closest in appearance to meteorite, but with the advantage that because it's a man-made material rather than a natural material, you can mix in a liberal dose of Lume when it's forged, giving a really interesting look both when the lights are on and when the lights are off. And that is all three then. Decently legible thanks to well-proportioned hands and big numerals, plenty of references to the Dirty Dozen originals, but also plenty of new features to make the Terra its own thing. On wrist, well, I'll show you all three watches just for fun, but I will say that the leather doesn't really do much for me personally. I don't wear a lot of leather straps on my own watches, and it means that you can't get the watch wet, so it just doesn't quite work for me personally. You buy what you like, obviously, but I think maybe the FKM options are going to be a bit more interesting and more suitable for the watch. Hey, at least the stitching is colour matched and the hardware on this bronze one is perfectly pleasant. The watch itself, no surprises, 3844 and less than 12mm thick. It's all very neat and tidy, and on the bronze one there's plenty of visual interest from the high polished bezel edge that glimpses in unison with the high polished edges to the two main hands. No surprises from the bracelet version either, except for maybe the 20 to 25 grams that you weren't necessarily expecting would be there. Hey, at least the weight is in the bracelet rather than the head of the watch, so it doesn't bobble around or slide around. As nice as the bracelet is, it's the FKM and canvas one that has piqued my interest though. It reminds me of a strap that I bought from Hirsch many years ago, and I think I paid well over $100 just for the strap. FKM rubber on the underside and a thin layer of canvas on the upper edge so you can get it wet, and if you do, it will dry very quickly. Similar but different hardware to the one that I just showed you on the bronze watch. Both straps are quick release, by the way. It functions very similarly to the Christopher Ward equivalent strap, but it's much more compliant and much more comfortable. Not as compliant as you get from a straight up rubber strap, but it does at least conform to the wrist fairly well. I am surprised there's no NATO strap option with any of these, because that's always popular with field style watches, even though again, it's not quite period correct. You go for what you like, but the bracelet and the FKM are the two standouts for me. Alright, moans and niggles. Well, with a $250 starting price, they're not what I would call expensive, but they're not as cheap as other Revelos have been in the past. And I know they are not the same thing, but I simply cannot review an affordable field watch without at least referencing the Hamilton Khaki. Probably the single most iconic modern interpretation of the genre, even though I appreciate it's not quite in the Dirty Dozen style. $450 USD if you do go grey, so definitely more than the Revelo, but it should at least be on your radar if you're looking for a field watch. Design-wise, the Terra reminds me a lot actually of the kind of stuff that Zelos used to make. Now, that is not a dig at either brand, far from it. Zelos were the pioneers of using materials like Lume-infused forged carbon for their dials. But their prices have pushed up and up over the last few years, and it's nice to see brands like Revelo coming in and offering the same materials for old Zelos money rather than new Zelos money, if you know what I mean. And much like Zelos, these designs are 11 out of 10. Not just carbon dial, but lumed carbon dial. Not just aventurine, but red aventurine, you know what I mean. There are a couple of more low-key options in the range. I think the kind of black sand and fume army sand look like the most traditional of the bunch. Pretty much all of the others though would have been guaranteed to get you shot at had you actually worn one on your wrist during World War II. And then of course there's the movement. Look, there's nothing wrong with the Seagull ST17, they've been making them for nearly 25 years. It is therefore a solid, reliable, proven choice. But it's just not the movement that too many people would pick if they had the choice. I understand why Revelo selected it, because it's the most sensible, affordable option that allows them a small second at 6, a crown at 3, and an attractive asking price. But I suspect most people buying a watch would much rather have seen a Seiko or a Miyota on the spec sheet rather than a Seagull. And I suspect most people would also have rather seen a metal movement holder than a plastic one. But if none of those things are a big problem for you and you're still here watching this video at this stage, this is a really, really solid offering for the money being asked. And let's just remind ourselves again of just what you get for the money being asked. $350, all stainless steel on a good bracelet with a mineral dial, cast lume block, Arabic numerals, top hat, sapphire crystal, lume crown, quick release end links, on the fly adjustable clasp, 2-year warranty. If you are well down the watch collecting rabbit hole to the point where you're looking for something that you don't already have, you don't already have a modern interpretation of a Dirty Dozen field watch with a red aventurine dial, do you? No, you don't, because this is the first one that has ever existed. So there you have it. Well done for making it all the way to the end of the video. I have looked at 3 or 4 other Revelos. Here are 2 of my favourites. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.